One of the things I love about having a channel focused on real estate, how I talk to various millionaires, is I get introduced to new applications, new people all the time. I want to give Jonathan Twomley a shout out for this introduction. He indicated that Jordan and team are building something special around deal analysis. So I want to go ahead and have a conversation, see what we're talking about, take a look at the application. But before we do that, let's meet Jordan. Jordan, how you doing, man?
I am very well. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. We've been following you for a while, and so it's an absolute pleasure. I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate. Thank you, Jonathan, for the introduction. Jordan, why don't you do me a favor? Tell us who you are. Tell us a little bit about your company. Tell us about kind of the avatar of who you are developing a solution for.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's important too. I think there's a lot of white noise in this industry right now, and so there's a lot of people who are maybe pretending to be something they're not, and that's definitely not where I want to be.
Just a little
Um,
bit.
yeah, exactly. So I've been in the real estate game for about 24 years now, not professionally for 13 years. But the majority of my career, both personally and professionally, has been predicated on investment real estate. I love it. It honestly, it changed my life. And I've spent a lot of time in this industry, and I'm not just another Joe Blow. Like, I'm really good at what I do. I'm number three in the world for Remax commercial, number three in the globally, not just Canada, not just the US, but globally. And I've attained that by being very good at what I do, and I've built a lot of fantastic relationships over the years. I now consult for a number of big funds and syndications on how to identify really good assets and how to undertake thorough evaluations. And yeah, it's been a dream of mine to be able to help people. As prior to real estate, I was a police officer for 9 years in Toronto, which is a massive metropolitan area in Canada. And I firmly believe that it's important to try and help and to mentor and to teach. And when it comes to real estate, I mean, it's no different. It can be a highly volatile
Mhm.
industry and very risky. It's like these are some of the biggest purchases we're ever going to make our entire careers, and you make one bad purchase, it can ruin you. And
Oh,
so for
no
me, a
question.
lot of what I did, yeah, was predicated on how to thoroughly educate my clients or myself and how to undertake really proper evaluations. And I just found it was oftentimes left up to napkin math. And I
Mm.
didn't want to be that guy who was, you know, jotting down, information on the back of a napkin or an envelope. And especially, there's a lot of variables to consider when you do these things. And so that's why I would rely on software, but I found the software I used just wasn't comprehensive enough to do what I needed it to do. Because for me, I always looked at a property like anything and how can I make an improvement to it to increase its value? Because
Mm.
I wasn't independently wealthy. And for me, just to stick a bunch of money into a property and leave it for 10 years, well, it was still a good option. It wasn't where I needed to be. I needed to put my money into this property, then to increase its value, and at some point take that back out, which it's
Hmm.
the BRRRR, right? Buy,
Hmm.
renovate, refinance, repeat. I need to do that on a consistent basis so I could build up my net worth as fast as I possibly could. And so that's why software was so incredibly important. You take a snapshot of a property, well, that doesn't tell you anything. That just tells you how
Mm.
the property is performing, but I need to know more than that. And so that's what led us to do what we did today.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in there that I want to peel back, and we'll obviously take a look at the
Yeah.
application and see what's what. I think there's a couple of truisms with real estate that you may hear early, but you don't really feel until you're in the game a couple of decades, like both you and I are.
Mhm.
And that is just the fact that you make your money when you buy,
Yeah.
right? When you're new in the game and you don't know anything yet, you think that statement is stupid because you obviously recognize what you did when you sell,
Mhm.
but you make your money at the purchase. And the second thing I want to talk about is what you call back of the napkin math. I can't tell you how many people did stupid deals with bad assumptions on the
Yeah.
back of the napkin the last 3 years,
Mhm.
right? I call them financial engineers. They were not operators. They didn't have a plan. They were playing with momentum. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, they're going to they themselves, and unfortunately a lot of these folks are going to hurt a lot of other people
Yeah.
because they did back of the napkin math. And it's just it's
No
so
exit
true. Like,
strategy. Yeah.
yeah, they had one. It was called a hope and a prayer, and hope left the building.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, that's right. Yeah, you can't, and that's, it's, we were just doing a webinar before we hopped on with you, and it's like one of the things I preach is, what is your exit strategy? Like, at the end of the day, failing to plan is planning to fail. And I hate saying it, but it's so true. Like, if you don't know exactly what your plan is with this property, you have no business doing it. And again, it's not always the buyer's fault, because, at the end of the day, we have to learn this from somewhere. And who do you learn it from, right? Who do you trust? Who don't you trust? And, we talk about mentors in this business, and following people who have actually done it, not just pretended to do it, but
Mm,
actually have done it, and, learn from our mistakes. I mean, God, I've made a lot.
yeah.
I've made a lot of
Yeah.
mistakes, but, I'll tell you, you know, I would say a mistake is only something that you make twice, and I don't do them again. You got to learn
Mm,
from those things. So it's so important. But what is your exit strategy? Like you said, your buy. Like, how incredibly important is that? Your buy. And it's funny. One of the examples I'll show you later, it's an example of a really bad buy. And it's like, but on its face value, it looks like it's actually a decent purchase. But this is where
mm,
people get confused, because they don't have a plan. They don't know what their exit strategy is, and they're relying on a hope and a prayer that they can take a negative cash flowing property to a cash flowing property, but they don't know how to take the steps to get there. And so it's
yeah.
yeah, you're 100% right. The buy is so incredibly important.
Yeah, and on that aspect, what on this channel we call those alligators, because I needed an image. I wrote about in my first book, One Rental at a Time, my very first house we bought. We did it the right way, all of that stuff. A couple of years in, I went back to a bank and did a cash out refi. I was an idiot. I was a moron. The bank said, "How much do you want?" I said, "How much can I get?" And they gave it to me. And then all of a sudden, I had to cut a check. Right? I had to work like 3 hours a week just to pay someone else to live in my house. How stupid was that?
Yeah, yeah, that's
Right? You
right.
don't no no alligators, folks. I don't care, right? And then we talk about exit strategies. I
Mhm,
have one. I'm going to buy and hold this thing forever. So it
mhm.
better cash flow. For me, it has to cash flow
Yeah,
day one,
yeah.
right? It could have
Mhm.
value add aspects, but that's all gravy in a plan because it always takes longer. It always takes more time. It always takes more money. It always, people talk about, I'm going to buy a rundown building and I'm going to upgrade the tenants. Let me just tell you right now, as somebody who's done that, it takes 2 or 3 turns to really get the upgrade because you don't upgrade all at once, one
That's
at a
right.
time. It's
That's right.
just a nightmare. So I guess the last thing to talk about when I go back to the avatar for this, you talk about being the number 3
Mhm,
Remax agent in the world.
mhm.
You talk about consulting for funds. So are we talking about something that's going to be very useful for apartments and multifamily and the big stuff, or is this something that hey, a little single family duplex quad purchase person could look at?
Yeah, realistically, that's probably going to be the target market, because the software, just by virtue of using it, teaches you how to undertake thorough valuations. At the end of the day, I often analyze large apartment buildings for my clients in this system. It can do anything from, your single family conversion to a duplex or triplex to a 500 unit apartment building. It just depends on, you have to in manually input in all of those unit numbers. But I mean, it does all of that. And it's, yes, I do a lot of work with big institutional clients, but I do a lot of work with smaller clients too, as does my team, right? So I provide the backing and education for a real estate team that, and we provide service to all different aspects of the real estate investment community. So it can really be used by anybody and should be used by anybody. It's like, doesn't have to be the small place, but again, I think the person who's going to benefit the most from it will be the smaller groups. Again, a lot of the funds I work with, they have their own systems.
Yeah,
So, and that's just how it works, right? But then I'll work with the buyers who, are creating their own little investment funds, and they'll buy 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 apartment buildings, and they don't have any software. And so
mm,
they'll use this software because I've compared my software to what the funds use, because I work with them and I consult with them on how to develop their own systems, and they've developed their
sure.
systems based on what I do. And so they're
Okay.
very comparable. But I mean,
Mm,
the difference is mine is easy to use. Theirs is quite complicated because it's all built on Excel spreadsheets. But
yeah.
anybody can use this. So yeah, the ideal avatar is anybody. I mean, I use, or you could be a realtor too. I mean, geez, I use this software all the time just to find investments for clients that aren't, I even take on market properties and I undertake evaluations. It could be your listing, and then I send it to a bunch of other buyers, but it's broken
Mm.
down beautifully so it's easy to understand. So
All
a
right.
lot of utility.
Yeah, well, I would tell you is when you look at one rental at a time, and you kind of look at who comes back each and every week or day to watch the channel. It's probably people getting started. probably, single family to maybe fourplexes. We obviously have some people doing bigger stuff, but I would say the majority, they're buying houses, single families, maybe a duplex to a quad.
Mm-hmm.
But let's anything you want to say about the app before we kind of pull it up and see what's what?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is it's easy to use. We are changing the user interface, so that is in development right now. So what everybody's going to see is this is our second version of the product that's been on market. And the other thing I would tell you too is we're a small company, and the nice part about a small company is, when you ask, we deliver, we listen,
Mhm,
and so we've made a lot of changes to the software based on user inputs, and you know what, we value it. The more inputs we get, the better. We want to make this the best software that people can use, that's affordable, and that works really, really well. And so, yeah, that would be the only thing I would want to add.
all right. Well, let's take a look. Let's see what the team has been working on.
Beautiful. I'll just share my screen.
Mhm.
Let me know if this is up for you.
Yep, we can see it.
Beautiful. So this is the main dashboard page that you'll log into. This is one of our test accounts. So you're going to see a lot of information in here, and not to confuse people, but one of the nice parts is we do build in a contacts page. And so if we send a listing, so let's say we do an evaluation and we send a property through our share feature, we can actually track how many times they open it, which is really cool. And so if you're a joint venture partner and you're trying to find a person to do a deal with, you can actually gauge interest through the number of views, or if they've actually imported it into their own system. And so where a lot of people can spend a lot of time is in what I called is the duplication of work,
Mhm,
where I do evaluation, and then Michael, I say to you, hey, I'm going to send over this property. What do you let me know what you think? And then you spend, 30 or 40 minutes on doing your own evaluation. It takes time. And so we've created a collaboration function where we can instantly share data back and forth, so we don't have to do a step multiple times. So this is
mhm.
our main dashboard page. We have a criteria function, which this was a user request. Oh, that didn't open up. Here we go. So this was a user request to build in a criteria function, so you can set certain criteria when you undertake your own evaluations, and the system is going to spit that back out so you can get a really quick glance. So we do it from purchase, and I'll show you how this translates into the system through your renovation and then into the refinance option. So I'll give you an example of what that looks like. Here's a test property we did. This actually was a legitimate property that sold on market. We have some little bit of raw data here, which we don't need, but we get right into the purchase worksheet. So, I mean, anybody who uses software, there's going to be certain information we need. So the purchase price information, the down payment information, okay, amortization, interest rate, all that kind of fun stuff. We have the ability to track multiple loans or seller financing.
Mhm.
And then we've also built in, your cash required to close. Now, one of the neat things that we've done here is you'll see under rental income, it's actually for all sections. Let's say you want to do a really fast evaluation, Michael. You
Mhm.
can do the units individually, or you can do it as a total, just so in case you want to go through something really fast. So if you don't want to waste your time putting in every single unit,
Sure.
and then let's say you wanted to be very critical, you can actually build your own rent roll, and you can input in things like bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage. And the reason being is because we're going to be building out a square foot per bedroom per unit metric as well, but it's not released. And you can also build out a tenant details as well with lease start dates, all that kind of stuff.
Got
So
it.
that's the whole point of why we do that. So we want to try and collect as much data as possible. Reason being is if you're going to be partnering with somebody, you want to be very thorough on the information you have. Or if you're selling a property, for example, you want to have all that information handy. And again, we have the same thing for other income. You can, if you have parking, laundry, storage, you can add a bunch, you can delete them.
Mhm.
It's really again, the system's relatively intuitive. And then we take into account our expensive, again, the same thing where you can itemize or you can total. I always like to itemize my expenses, but if I'm doing a really quick evaluation, one thing we're building in that's not here, you'll see in the total, we're going to be building a sliding scale. So I often use, 25 to 35% as my total expenses on a property. And so we can do those quickly with a sliding scale. That should be out
Sure.
next week. And then, making sure you take into account things like your property taxes, insurance, repairs and maintenance are the biggest one I find that's missed all the time.
Mhm.
Lawn, snow. I don't have a capital expense account here, but oftentimes I build one of those in because I know things like roofs and boilers and
Yep.
furnaces, windows, those things all need to be replaced. And I can assure you, and you know this better than most, that 5% you're collecting a month isn't going to cut
Mhm.
it.
No.
But then one of the nice parts is before we even get any further than this, Michael, is we see this big red flag here, negative cash flow.
Hmm.
And so for me, this is already a red flag.
Yep.
And I'm already very hesitant to even move forward to conduct a further evaluation. However, for the purposes of a demonstration, I'm going to do so. And so
Sure.
we get into the assumptions in the particular area this property is located and its classification. This is a C class property, so it'd be between a 6 and a 6.5% cap rate. The system automatically spits out what it thinks the potential value should be. And so
Hmm.
what we know right away is moving into the summary page is we already know that the system's telling us, hey, you're probably overpaying for this property. Do you still want to keep moving
Yeah.
forward?
Yeah. You're overpaying by 100 grand. How do you
100
feel?
grand. Yeah, and I'll tell you, it happens, right? Especially in markets where there's a very high demand. And
Sure.
so we get some really quick information here. So our investment criteria, what we see is that there's more red X's than green check marks. So again, for me, this is another red flag. I'm saying, listen, a lot of the rules here, like it's not meeting the ROI requirement. There's no cash flow. The cap rate's too low. The 1% rule is not being met. This is probably something I wouldn't make this purchase. So, and I would
Hmm.
advise my clients not to make this purchase.
Hmm.
And then we see, some of the other information. So the cash on cash, the recapture, the passive appreciation, our total ROI is just too low. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And the biggest one, as you said, Mike, you want cash flow. There's no cash flow here.
Hmm.
But then some other information we track are the debt yields and the debt coverage ratio. When we get into the bigger properties, this is a really big factor here
Hmm.
because we want to see a 1.1 to a 1.3 debt coverage ratio, and we just don't see it in this.
Yeah.
Um, Again, I don't want to spend too much time on the summary page, but again, a lot of the data here you can break down, you can look at it in detail. Goes through your purchase summaries, your cash flow ability. Something neat is we can go through a projection summary based on, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years. And we can actually track like your total equity. Now, one thing you're going to notice too is the system generates its equity based on what it determines the value to be, not what you paid for it. And this is where people
Mm.
often go wrong in their projections is they may overpay for a property and they're basing their equity based on what their down payment was. But the fact of the matter is they've overpaid for it.
They
So
overpaid. Yeah.
so there is no equity, right? And so
Hmm.
what we do is we base our evaluations based on what the system deems the property to be. And so you can do it a number of ways. We can do it by cap rate, or we can do it by your estimation of value. And so there's a few different ways when we can track amortization, value. I mean, everything you need we can track, and then we can even break it down to a more granular look, and we can actually break it down into the nitty gritty here where you can actually take a look at your equity and your total profits over the course of 5, 10, 15. It just keeps going, right?
All right.
But then from here, if you're like me, you're going to want to refinance this. So you're going to want to say, okay, I want to improve this property. What can I possibly do? And so the only possible way to make this property work is to bring it to a positive cash flow position. So what we've done here is we see the original income.
Well, actually, Jordan, can I stop you there for a second?
Yeah, for sure.
So, what would happen if, because again, even the system told you, "Hey, idiot, you're overpaying by 100 grand."
Mhm.
What would happen if you went back in and wrote a stupid, disrespectful offer at 460, and then let's just assume the seller says yes? What are the numbers? Can you just change the purchase price to
Certainly.
460 and see what magic happens?
Certainly can.
I figured.
And so it's funny you say that because we were going to build in a system where you could switch the number based on what the system generates, but we left it as is. But this is where you get into this position here. We're buying it based on what the system tells you it's worth. So then we start seeing new rules met,
Yeah.
and we see that we're buying based on market value here.
Yeah. So
But once
cash on
again,
cash is no longer negative, but
yes,
it's
but positive.
1%. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want
All
me to
right.
keep going through, or do you want me to revert back to the
Yeah,
original?
you can go back and do what I was just curious what
Yeah.
would change if we went back to the recommended price. Okay.
So let me get into the rehab. So this is the section that most people get a little bit confused on, and this is where the AI components is being built in currently. So what we want to do is we want the system to start generating what it believes the projected rents could be on a unit not what they are, but what they could be. And so this particular instant, this is a manual function currently, but it will be automated.
Mhm.
So we know, given the location and the bedroom count, that the 2 3 bedroom units could easily be $1,850 a month, and the 2 bedroom unit could be $1,450 a month. Okay, so we put those numbers in, but it doesn't mean we're going to use those numbers. Okay, so what we're going to do is say we're going to take the lowest unit, and we're going to say, you know what? I think out of all 3 of these units, my highest likelihood of improving this is going to be to buy this tenant out. And so we go in, we identify what the unit cost, the renovation cost is going to be, the cash for keys, the tenant buyout, and we identify a rehab length. And the reason we do that is because we want to track proper carrying cost. So we want to make sure
Mhm.
that our analytics are accurate. And so we'll put this into the system. These two we're going to leave the same. This one's already 1850. We're going to leave this one as is. And so we know that, listen, we have a probability of turning this one unit. So let's use the scenario that we've talked to the tenant, and they said they'd be open to a buyout. They want 10 grand. Okay.
Okay.
This isn't actually the case on this particular property. The tenant wasn't going to leave, but I'm going to say the only way to make this even a possibility is if we get one unit, if we can flip one unit.
Mhm.
Okay. The system will, and then we're going to take into account parking. Actually, the parking's probably going to be more like $50 a month. And we're going to be installing, there is no laundry in the building currently, but we're going to be putting in laundry, and we're going to be looking at about $100. That's probably a little bit expensive. Let's say maybe $65 a month in laundry. No storage, so we can delete that. The expensing, so the system will repopulate the expensing based on the new percentages. So you see repairs and maintenance have all been increased. The other utility cost stays the same. We see a new projected income. We're going to say, hey, listen, we're looking at about a 12-month lead time on this. The reason we want to put something in here is so the system can track our stabilization period on our purchase. So we always want to build in a stabilization period. We look at the rehab cost. I'm going to build in laundry room. Let's
Mhm.
say, I don't know, 15 grand. It's going to
Yeah.
cost to build in the laundry room, the plumbing, all that kind of fun stuff. We save it.
Mhm.
We know our total rehab cost is going to be roughly $50,000. It builds in our carrying cost. But then I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to put this on my line of credit because I don't want to use my cash for this. So I'm going to finance all 50,000 through a line of credit. It's going to be at an interest rate of 8%.
Mm.
And I'm going to run that along with my stabilization period. And so the reason we want to do this too, and that am I going to pay it out on refinance or am I not? So
Okay.
if I can pay it out, I'm going to. And this was another user request. He says, listen, anytime I do these projects, I'm typically doing a joint venture and I'm going to be using my client's borrowed funds. So I want to be able to track that cost. And so it makes
Mhm.
sense, right?
Yep.
Any other additional financing you can build in. Carrying costs, we like to tabulate. We do it automatically for you, but you can also customize your carrying cost if you want to be. If you know it's going to be a totally vacant building, maybe your utility cost is going to be lower, or maybe your maintenance cost because you're doing a full renovation might be lower. So you can customize it. And then we're going to say, you know, given the location, we're going to be improving this property from a Class C to a Class B. We're going to change the cap rate a bit. So we can do based on cap rate or based on, you know, a manually entered after renovation value. But I'm going to use just based on cap rate. And we're going to use, let's go proposed cap rate of 5.5. So then the system spits out a potential. Again, these are just suggestions. It doesn't mean this is actually going to be the value.
Mhm.
Typically, Michael, as you know, when you're dealing with, you know, 3 or 4 or 2 units, oftentimes there's a direct comparison approach brought in for valuations, which is why we have the ability to do your own value. But
Right.
again, income is going to be an important factor in this. So I typically use cap rate, but sometimes I'll modify that. If it's like a duplex, I might use a
Mm.
direct comparison approach.
Okay.
And then what we see here, we see 2 numbers. So this is what the system thinks the value is going to be worth. And this is what the system thinks it could be worth if you actually renovated all 3 units. But we didn't
Mm.
do that, right? So
Right.
we're going to go with the big green number. We hit submit and analyze. And then we say, oh, shit, okay, this is looking a little bit better. I see a little bit of cash flow. I have about almost 200 grand into the property, or no, this is my equity, my new equity. I have about 140,000 invested. But for me, these 3 figures, so my cash on cash, recapture, and appreciation are still far too low. So this
Yeah.
is still a no for me, like a hard no. We've
Right.
seen an increase in value based on forced appreciation, but not what it needs to be. And then again, a lot of the same data, the system's going to show you your purchase price, the fact that you're overpaying. And again, a lot of this data we've already seen, but then we
Mhm.
say, you know what if I wanted to refinance? And again, you don't have to go this far in the system. It's just if you want to. And
Right.
they say, well, I'm going to want to refinance it. Okay, we're going to go with, let's say, a 75% loan to value at, the interest rates in a year should be pulling back. So this is a little speculation. So this
Mhm.
requires, a user to do their due diligence and talk to their broker, but we're going to be going at a bit
Sure.
of a lower interest rate, which is going to increase our cash flow. Okay. We see there's going to be some refinancing costs here, an appraisal we're going to have to pay for, lawyers' fees could be $2,400. It could be other
Mhm.
fees that we have to build in. You can build in any fees you want or pull out any fees. And then we're going to submit and analyze. And this is where the system really shines, where it shows you from purchase through your renovation, through your new refinance. It
Mm.
now shows you your original purchase statistics and your refinance statistics. And one thing you'll see is you're still 16% passive appreciation, almost 7% in recapture, and 4% cash on cash. That is ugly. It's still a no-brainer to me. I like to see at least 30 to 50% on refinances.
Mhm.
And then you see that your cash left in is still $122,000, but you see a bit of cash flow. But it's a great way for someone to look at it and say, you know what? I think there's a lot other properties I can purchase out there that
Mhm.
are going to make a lot of sense, because in analyzing this property, you've had to put far too much money out to get far too little money back out of it. So it doesn't make any sense at all. But the scary part is this property sold on market to somebody who thought they were making a good investment. So I talked to the listing agent who sold this, and he's like, I don't know how it sold, but it sold.
Mm.
And this is the type of thing that people need to avoid, because it's very dangerous. I mean, you're trading dollars essentially, and it's going to be a long time before you can see those profits.
Yeah, there's no way somebody in
Yeah.
my world should be doing this deal.
Yes.
It's not, it's a
Agreed.
bad deal. It's not even an
Agreed.
average or good deal,
It's a
let alone
terrible deal.
great
Yeah,
deal. Yeah, it's
I
terrible.
agree. And then
But
from here, if I
terrible
wanted
deals
to,
get
like
done all the time. They get done all
they,
the
they,
time.
they do. And then from here, if you want to share the property, you can, let's say you want a joint venture with somebody, or you want to look for partners, you can create a public link, and you can even hide the address or show the address. And then you can actually just either create a link or share to the email individually. And this is a great way for, I mean, realtors especially can use this to advertise for potential clients as well. And then you can break down the rent rolls, a comparison of your income and expenses through all stages. And yeah, so I mean, we're building in a really cool feature, which we don't have yet, which is coming next month, is a portfolio forecasting system where we can actually, if you make a purchase, we're actually going to track your net worth.
Mm.
And the system's going to be sending you notifications on when you have equity opportunities. And so that's coming into it. And you can even split it if you have partners in the property as well. So we have a lot of really cool things coming. Um, but yeah,
Very
this
cool.
is this is and then this is the feedback button here. So if you want to request, you need a feature, you want to request
Mm.
something, for all ears. We want to make this as user friendly as possible. That's the purpose.
Yeah.
And we find it's a really, really valuable tool. And you can use it anywhere. We have users all over. We have a ton of American users. We have users in Australia. We have users in Great Britain. So it's been awesome. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun. There's lots in this, and I like pretty much everything I'm seeing because it helps you understand the purchase. A lot of people, especially today, are doing the versions of BRRRR or equity extractions. A lot of people are early in the game and they're definitely in acquisition mode. They have a full-time job, so maybe they're
Yep.
not talking about maximum cash flow. They're
Mhm.
still stacking bricks, which is interesting. I like how it tells you kind of the red X's, green checks for your
Mhm.
rules. That's cool.
Mhm.
Uh, can you show another example? So this was a
Yeah.
triplex, maybe, show a slightly bigger example if somebody wanted to look at
Here's
something bigger.
yeah. So here's a 16 unit.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, let's do that
So
one.
here's a 16 unit. So this one was neat. So this is, I was just doing my webinars, and one of the questions I got asked is, where do you find your deals? Now, I
Mm.
do a lot of off market, but I do a lot of on market too. And this one is a great example of an on market property that was on the market for 8 months, and it was listed. It was
Yep.
listed at 4.5 million. Again, some of our values up here can be pretty, but it was a brand new build. So 4.5 million. We got it down to 3.9. It was still higher than I wanted.
Mhm.
But the interesting part is, and I know, again, this is a Canadian property. So being a Canadian property, there were There's the ability to mortgage through an insurance company. So the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation will give you a confirmation of insurance on it, and you can get really favorable rates at really long amortizations. And so this property
Yep.
was a 50-year amortization at 4.5%, but the down payment was 5% down. And so the interesting part is when you upload all of the information in here, you go through all of your purchasing costs, you break down all your unit cost. What you get when you get to the summary page is you get a really interesting cash flow number here. So we're cash flow positive almost $2,200 a month. And what we see is that our ROI on purchase is 55%. So for
Mm.
me, there's a lot of bells being rung here saying, hey, this property deserves a closer look.
Yep.
And so for this one, it made a lot of sense. Our ROI was so high that even just as a buy and hold, this one was really interesting. And so the system still generated a warning saying, hey, we think you might be potentially overpaying for this. But at the end of the day, it made sense to me because the ROI on purchase, and you can just hover over these and it will break it down for you on what it is. But the ROI made total sense. And the
Yeah.
debt coveraging ratio was within limits. It was 1.14. And with this particular property on this particular program, 1.1 was the limit. So again, it checked a lot of the right boxes. The other interesting fact to mention is this was a student rental building.
Mm.
And what you didn't see here, and I want to just draw attention to it because this is all part of how we do our valuations. I get right to the expenses here. And what you're going to notice right off the bat is the maintenance, 10%, really
Wow.
high on this one. So
Mhm.
because there is a capital expense component to this. So the maintenance was really expensive and the utility cost was massive. So 6% of the gross income was attributed to hydro. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that the owner did this as a student rental
Mhm.
and he decided just to pay for the utilities, but every single unit in this building has its own separate hydrometer.
Oh, wow.
And so what we know is that the average tenancy of this property is roughly 2 years. And so the plan with this particular buyer is to buy the building and then shift at least half of the tenant profile back to long-term tenants, if not all of the building to long-term tenants. And it's in a desirable area and pass along that utility cost back to the buyer again. So we know we're going to be
Mm.
bringing that utility cost down by roughly $20,000.
Right.
And another reason why the maintenance is so expensive because they rent the units out per bedroom. And
Oh,
so
there you go.
it's a lot. So there's a lot more work involved in doing that. And so, there's an internet expense, for example, which they can be removed. There's a furniture expense because part of it's,
Yep.
there's furniture. The admin expense is almost, I mean, again, the expensing on this property are ridiculous. And so
Well,
what we
the,
know
the
is,
the other thing I like there is again, you with your ability to add lines or categories, you're able to really you don't have to fudge anything, right? Sometimes when you build
right,
these base Excel spreadsheets, you've got to put these expenses together under other buckets.
yeah.
Yeah, other in here you can really break it down, which is allows you to attack them line by line. If
You can be
that's
very granular. And that is
right,
that, and where we really notice that is when we get into the rehab component. And so we know we're going to be flipping a number of these units because they
look
are
at
under rent.
that.
So yeah,
Yep.
we know that because of the 2-year tenancy, we're going to be doing this at a relatively quickly. And I'm just going to get down to the income here. So we see the repairs and maintenance have been reduced to 6%. The
Mhm.
hydro cost, we're going to reduce that. I'm going to leave it at 16,000, saying that we're only going to flip half the units. So long-term
Okay.
tenants in half, we're going to leave the rest alone. And we know we're going to be able to remove the furniture cost, which I can reduce this to 0.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to leave just the admin expense just to leave it. And then we know this is going to be a 24-month project. I'm not going to bother financing any rehab costs in this. I'm going to keep it pretty simple. And then what the system is going to do is it's going to spit out a new potential value. So we're looking at almost $1 million increase in value in 2 years, and that's bona fide. So that is totally legitimate. We get into submitting it. Now we see, geez, look at our cash flow. I mean,
Yeah.
significantly better. We see our new investment metrics have gone up. Our cash on cash is almost 20%. I mean, you don't see that, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Like, you rarely see that.
Hmm.
And when we go back through to look at the refinance, let's say you wanted to do a refinance down the road, the same MLI Select program, CMHC insurance premiums, we take it all into advisement, we calculate it, and then we look at your entire investments being paid out. Plus, you're going to put almost $600,000 back in your pocket. And so, again, these are rare. These don't
Hmm.
come along all the time, but this is a perfect example of how you can get great on-market properties that have a really good opportunity to pull all your investment back out. Because once you pull your investment back out, you've mitigated your risk.
Hmm.
And again, I don't always recommend this. I probably wouldn't pull all the money back out, but I mean, it's just an example of what you could potentially do while still seeing positive cash flow. And
Yeah.
so this is just,
Yeah.
again, one example. But
Yeah, this
it's
this this clearly has a lot in this. If somebody wanted to, where does somebody go to kind of look at this? Because I have a lot of people who are very data oriented on the channel. A lot of people that would look at this and really, frankly, geek out. Um, is there a trial? Is where do people go to
there is, yeah,
play
and,
with
I'll
this?
give that to you so you can post that. But there is going to be a trial. We're going to create one custom just for you.
Mm,
And
okay.
so people, when they enter in your code, we'll give them a 30-day trial.
Oh,
And
nice.
again, and the nice part too is, and and at no cost, I'm not selling anything. So the only thing I want to promote is how to conduct really thorough evaluations. They can
Hmm.
even book a one-on-one with me to work through a property. And so
Oh,
uh,
wow.
yeah. Yeah. So we are a young company. I'm not, and I promise you, I'm not selling anything else. I'm not selling coaching. I'm not selling
Hmm.
anything. I don't have the time for that. All I want to do is help people conduct really good evaluations. And so they'll get a free
Okay.
30-day trial. And if they want, they can write from the website. There's going to be another button beside feedback, which is book one-on-one consultation with me. They
Mm,
get a free 30-minute and I'll work through the property with them, but it has to be with your code as well.
okay. So I just want to, so there's going to be a website we'll give them a
Yep.
code. That code gives them 30 days and the
Yep.
ability to bring you a property. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, and I'll help them work through an example, which I've been
Wow.
doing. And well, I find it's useful too. I think people find it to be of a great benefit to them. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention, this shows the stabilization period as well, the 2-year stabilization period, so you can break that down as well. But
Yeah.
ultimately, at the end of the day, with what we're moving this for, I think
Something I just had this idea. I don't know if it's going to work out, but shoot, I'll ask anyway. If somebody from my channel uses the code and books a one-on-one call with you, Jordan, I would appreciate it if you ask them, can we record this
oh yeah,
so
for
that
sure.
Michael can share it on his channel. A lot of the folks that come on my channel that work with me want to help educate others.
Mhm.
So I would guess that most people will say yes. And
Great.
assuming they do, I would love to get that video and post it just to have a real life example of somebody in my world working with you through an example. I think
Absolutely.
that'd be
Oh, we would
fun.
love to, for sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be our pleasure.
All right, folks. So if you're going to use the code and you're going to book a call, please at least consider saying yes to recording. I would love for him to Jordan answer your questions, but also share with the One Rental at a Time community because, as you know, we all learn together. Um, where can people learn more about your company, Jordan?
Burbot.ai. So now I should note that we're going through a rebranding right now.
Mhm.
Burr is pretty specific, and truthfully, the product does a lot more than just Burr.
Yeah,
Well, it
clearly.
does Burr,
Yeah.
it does a lot more. So we are going, and hey, if anybody has any name suggestions, we're running a bit of a contest if someone can help us come up with a really catchy name. But something just to note is we are building in a few more features here, which are not on this version.
Mhm.
We're going to be building in a commercial component.
Mhm.
So, sometimes properties like this may have a commercial element to it. And
Okay.
the way in which we undertake the evaluations on the commercial component are different because you
Oh,
get
for sure.
into TMI, taxes, maintenance, insurance, oftentimes that are passed on to the actual tenant. And so the system is going to be pre-calculating that so it can separate out your residential
Mm,
component from your commercial component. So
wow.
that is coming, and we're also building a land development assessment tool as well, which you would access from the main
Wow.
dashboard page.
That's
So
crazy.
if you want to get into, you want to get into builds. I mean, I have a number of clients right now. We sell a lot of land here, so we're involved in a lot
Mm,
of land development. And if someone wants to build an apartment building, they want to be able to structure that deal and how it's going to look and
sure.
how they can determine value. So that's in progress right now. We're probably 4 or 5 months out from that, but the commercial component we should have up and running pretty soon.
Very cool, Jordan. A lot of stuff here, folks. So again, you'll see a link in the description. You'll see a code. Again, I'll ask you if you do take the time to book a call with them, please consider allowing him to record it so that we can share with the rest of the world. Jordan, any closing thoughts?
Nothing for me, my friend. I really appreciate it. And honestly, like truly, like you will find value in this. At the end of the day, learning how to do really thorough evaluations could be the difference between you being successful and you failing in
Mm,
this. And it's and I've seen too many people fail
yeah, you and me
from
both.
not doing what they should be doing. And at the end of the day, it doesn't cost a lot. Like,
Yeah.
the use of our system is really, really inexpensive. So,
Well, let's hit you. The cost is ridiculously cheap. Why don't you tell them what it is so they're not surprised?
yeah, it's $20 a month.
20
And
bucks a month. There you
And
go.
I should say that will be changing. So once we hit our first milestone, I mean, we're going to be doubling, if not tripling the cost. At
Hmm.
the end of the day, I'm sure people can appreciate like
Oh, yeah.
the work that goes into this. It's immense. And but and again, people could spend thousands of dollars a year. And if it's saved, I mean, people spend 10, 15, 20, 30 grand a year to be involved in groups that teach
Hmm.
them how to do this. And oftentimes the majority of the teaching comes down to how to conduct proper valuations. So,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's no brainer.
Yeah. No, 20 bucks a month is
Yeah.
silly.
Yeah.
But again, folks, get in early, give feedback, ask for suggestions, play with it. And again, if you book a call, please allow it to be recorded so we can share with the world. Jordan, thank you very much. Have some fun.
Thank you, my friend. I really enjoyed it.
Mhm.